Welcome to Mobile Math Lessons on the Go. Today's learning goal, by the end of this lesson, I should be able to multiply together a positive number with a number that has one or two decimal places. And again, I want to do this without the use of a calculator. So a quick review of decimals, just a reminder of placeholders. So from the decimal, moving to the right, we move to tenths and hundredths. You'll notice there is no oneths. Everything is based from the 1 and moves out from there. So as you move to the left, you have tens. As you move to the right, it's tenths with a TH. As you move 2 over to the left, it's hundreds. As you move 2 over to the right, it's hundredths. That's really, really important. The decimal place is the point where things change. That's a little pun. As you go to the right from the decimal place, you're getting smaller. So you're looking for pieces of whole units. As you move to the left, you're getting larger. So you're looking at groups of hundreds, tens, or ones. So quick reminder, so when we are looking at decimals and fractions, there is some links there. So when we have this red writing here, which I'm going to call 0.5, and that's one of the reasons people struggle with decimals, because we tend to describe the decimal versus actually saying what it is. 0.5 or 0.5 is the same as 50 100ths, or the same as 5 tenths, or the same as 1 half. And if we could avoid saying 0.5 and use the more mathematical terms, we would probably eliminate some confusion on how to work with decimals. But the reality is most people describe decimals as they see them. So if we move down, one example, 0.75 is how we would say that in most everyday practices, but 0.75 is the same as 75 100ths, or 3/4. So you'll notice that both of those values in fraction form are less than 1. Okay, so I will try and use the best language I can, but when you're describing decimals, usually most people fall into describing it as 0.75 or something of that nature. So here's our first big idea. When we multiply by a decimal that is between 0 and 1, so that's a value that's small or bigger than 0 but less than 1, so not a whole unit, the product or our final result must get smaller. And this sometimes is a challenge for people to wrap their head around, because when we multiply numbers, we're used to them getting larger, but when we multiply by a decimal value that's between 0 and 1, the product or result actually gets smaller. So I have a little example here. 6 times 0.5, or 6 times 5 tenths, 6 times 1 half, however you need to say it. You'll notice I'm using my shortcut for multiplication, or my shortcut for addition. Repetitive addition is multiplication, so I'm just going to write out 6 groups of 1 half, or 0.5, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine them together. 2 halves make 1 whole unit. I have 3 whole units by the time I'm done, and you'll notice that the 3, the product, is smaller than the 6 that I initially started with. So I've multiplied 2 numbers together and I've gotten a smaller value. And that's one of the big ideas when multiplying by a decimal between 0 and 1. So let's take a look at the number model. I have 7 groups of 1/10. So 7 times 0.1, 7 times 1/10. So I have used a number model where I've written them all out. So you'll see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 0.1s. I'm going to combine the first 3, 4, 5 together to make 0.5, or 5 tenths. And to that I'm going to combine the last 2 to make 2 tenths. So 5 tenths plus 2 tenths is 7 tenths, or 0.7 as a lot of people will describe it. And notice that the result is smaller than the 7 I started with. So if you notice a few similarities between these, if I'm adding tenths, just like I'm adding ones, a lot of the properties are the same, except I have to keep track of the location of the decimal place. So we already have some knowledge of how to work with decimals. So I want to find the product of 4 times 6 tenths, or 4 times 0.6. So that's 4 groups of 6 tenths. So I've used my number model again here. I've shown the addition. I'm then going to break down the 6/10 into 5/10 plus 1/10. So I've repeated that. And then if I look at the red writing, the 0.5 or the 5/10, I'm going to combine those together to create 2 whole units. And then I have 4 remaining 1/10 or 0.1s. If I have 4 of those left over, when I combine them, I end up with 0.4 or 4/10. Combine them together, and I get 2.4 or 2 and 4/10 is the proper way to say that. And you'll notice again, my result is smaller than the original 4 in the starting question. If you want to take a look at the similarities between adding together 5/10 or 0.5s and compare them with just how we add 5s, you'll notice as we fill up groups of 10, whether they're less than 1 or greater than 1, as I create these two 5/10 added together make 10/10 or 1 whole unit. These two 5s are added together create 1 whole group of 10. So I've exceeded my single digit and I have to carry over and make larger values. And we'll see that throughout all of these examples. So counting decimals, whoops, I moved a little too fast. Counting decimals behaves the same as counting regular numbers, 1s, 10s, etc. So we've already looked at this one already. So if we look at 35 100ths or 0.35, these two pieces right here would combine to make 70 100ths. These two pieces would combine to make 70 100ths. And you could think of the 1.4 here as 140 100ths or 1 and 40 100ths. There's lots of ways to say these things, but again, we usually drop back into describing the decimal as 1.40, and that's what makes it confusing sometimes. If you compare that to adding 35s together, you'll notice that when I total up all of those 35s, I exceed the number of 10s I'm allowed to have, so I have to create groups of 100, and that's where I get the 140. So let's get into some actual multiplying. Find the product of 4 times 6/10 or 0.6. I've done the number model here. I just want to show you that the area model still works. So if I have 4 times 0.5, that is 4 groups of 0.5 all added together, or a grand total of 2 for the first location. And then the second group would be 4 groups of 0.1 all added together, or 0.4 or 4/10. And you'll notice when I add those two together, I get the exact same result. So the area model still works for decimals. We'll see there are some other strategies we're going to use as the decimals get more complicated. But let's try this one. Find the product of 5 times 0.9 or 5 times 9/10. So I have 5 groups of 9/10. I have my number model answer up here. 5 groups of 1/2 or 5/10 would be 2.5 or 2.5 or 2 and 5/10. 5 groups of 4/10. Okay, and that's where we got to be careful. So I have 5 groups of 0.4, and you can see this in the number model up above. When I total all of those up, I end up with a 2, or 20/10, if you want to think of it that way. When I add those two together, I still get the same value of 4.5 or 4 and 5/10. I know it's tricky. Bear with me here. We'll get it. Find the product of 3 times 0.75 or 3 times 75 100ths. So I've shown my number model here, and you can see where the parts come from. I've rearranged my 5/10, my 2/10, and my 5 100ths all together. If I look at my area model, if I have 3 groups of 5/10, that is 15/10 or 1 whole unit and 5/10 left over. I have 3 groups of 2/10, so that would be 6/10 total. And then I have 3 groups of 5 100ths. That would be 15 100ths. And when we add all of these values together, we end up with 2 and 25 100ths. So if you could press pause on the video and try the following, find the product for the following. So I'm multiplying these together, and again, a reminder, if we're multiplying by a decimal between 0 and 1, we expect our final result to get smaller. So please press pause now. Okay, welcome back. So I'm going to drop the shade here and we'll take a look at the answers. So I have written this out as 8 groups of 5/10ths, and then I'm just combining each group of 0.5, 2 groups of 0.5 to create one whole unit. So that's how I end up with 4. I may have to do some friendly number breaking down here with the 9/10ths. So for the second question, but I end up with 2.7 or 2 and 7/10ths. And then the last group is 4 groups of 15 100ths, and I end up with a total of 60 100ths. I could also write that as 6/10ths. So thank you for watching. Please watch again and pause where you may have had difficulties, and good luck in your future math problems.